My name is Ross Brown. I'm from the Green Party, and my question is primarily directed at the German ambassador. As we know, as a result of the crisis, private debt was socialised. A lot of that private debt, particularly in Ireland, was Germany's debt. And so you talk about the mutualisation in the Eurobonds as being off the table because of the risk to German taxpayers, but in essence, the Irish taxpayers have taken the German taxpayers' risk that they had when investing in Ireland. Maybe if I could also say that the consequence of German policy in Greece is literally we have people eating out of bins to feed themselves. And I see, how is that in any way justifiable as a means to any end? Maybe if I can get the final point and the big question that I would like to ask. The big question really is all about this. The whole issue is about politics, and we had the discussion there that the economics described as a science, but economics is just a fancy word for politics. And really, I studied it, so I know, and John Barry here thankfully taught me that. But the question is really, it's all about the fiscal compact, and in a sense the fiscal compact, it outlaws a whole political choice, i.e. Keynesian economics. So how is that in any way democratic?
Thank you. Thanks.
Simon Herbert, Green Party Dublin West, just to thank everybody for their contribution so far. And for our European guests, there's two things you can do tonight. There's a musical, it's called Anglo-Irish Bank. It's the rise and fall of this famous bank in Dublin, which made the biggest banking loss in history ever, anywhere in the world. Number two, there's a group now of economists and commentators doing a bit of a show as well, a five-man show, and they'll tell you how angry you should be about what went on, and that they never forecasted, of course. So, finally, getting to the question for the panel, economic forecasting was really invented so that astrology was made look respectable.
Hi, I'm Tim Sykes. I'm not with any party or anything like that. My question would be to the panel, can you outline any way that Ireland could maintain a competitive advantage compared to other countries in Europe should we bring our corporation tax in line with the European Union?
All right, we're going to take them in batches of three, so we'll take those three questions if we can have responses. I think we'll start with you, Mamas. Can you stand up? Yes, Mamas, sure.
Yeah, I can see, yeah.
Okay, great. Now, as I said at the beginning of my talk, I consider this to be an inner European dialogue. So I will be frank as well, and thank you for your frankness. You're perfectly entitled to criticize us. What we are doing today is engaging the dialogue about the right way ahead. There are different views. And by the way, this is not my personal view. And it's not even the view of the present government. As you may know, in about a year's time, there will be a general election in Germany. Forecasting the outcome of an election is probably even more difficult than forecasting how an economy will evolve. By the way, it reminded me of the definition of an economist. An economist is someone who will tell you tomorrow why the things he predicted yesterday didn't happen today. There's also another definition of economists, and I have kind of collected definitions of economists because I very much like this analogy to astrology that you gave us. An economist is good at are people who are good at numbers, but who lack the personality to be an accountant. Now, this is in some ways what happened in the lead-up to the present crisis. Probably we should listen less to economists and more, try to listen to our own common sense, in a sense. Now, common sense tells me, tells, by the way, not just this present German government, tells the German people. Because I mentioned we will have an election next year. Don't expect, even if there were a change in government, don't expect a major change in policy in Germany. Just 2 days ago, the leader or the co-leader of the Green Party. Actually, he is not the leader of the party, but John has been in correspondence with him lately. Jürgen Trittin, he gave an interview to one of our major dailies, and he was criticizing the Chancellor for not being thrifty enough. In terms of bringing down our debt, not in terms of what some of you call imposing austerity, which we totally reject. We are not imposing austerity on others, but he was kind of saying, you are not doing what you set out to do. And if implicitly he was saying, if we were to take over government, and he is one of the aspirants to become our next finance minister, by the way, we will have to do what is necessary to bring down German debt as well. So even if there were a change in government, I don't think the basic policy approach will change, because this is what is, let's say, reflects the opinion of the German people, and not just of the present government. Don't expect that there will be a change of government. What we do reject is that this is, let's say, imposing, as I said, imposing austerity on others. When you look back, and what I said, the three sources, the main sources of the crisis that I tried to identify. The first one is over-indebtedness, both public and private. Now this country suffered is still suffering the hangover from a bubble in this country, and part of it was a property bubble, was a banking bubble, a credit bubble, and this is, by the way, not just unique to Ireland. It's in many other countries that countries have lived beyond their means, and they are now paying up for this. We may not like it, but that's the brutal reality. That it's coming to haunt us, that we have not lived, many countries have not lived within their means. And by the way, I'm not saying this in kind of lecturing, I'm speaking from first-hand German experience, because I think it was already mentioned, we were in trouble, in deep trouble in the first half of the last decade. Mrs. Lieber mentioned, you may not use, I don't recall whether she used the term, Agenda 2010 was launched in Germany in 2003 because of the economic problems we were in at the time. We had double-digit unemployment, more than 5 million people unemployed in Germany at the time. We had meager growth rates. We were consistently breaching the 3% Maastricht rule in Germany. So Germany was in deep trouble during the time. And then we had to launch this reform program, which was called Agenda 2010. And I think Mr. Lieber was right in saying that in a kind of way we are lucky because we are benefiting from being the first mover having to do this. We had to bring down our public deficits, but even more important, we had to regain global competitiveness. And that's why Germany is so strong. We had to do certain structural reforms, and not just cutting back on welfare benefits, for example. No, the main thing that happened in Germany since the Agenda 2010 was launched was regaining competitiveness in German enterprises. That's why Germany is so strong today. Yes, there was wage restraint involved in this. It is true. And we had over a number of years almost zero increase in wages in Germany. So yes, there was belt tightening in Germany. But look where we are today, being the strongest economy in Europe. So we had to launch the structural reform process, both in terms of the public, in terms of the budgets, but even more important in terms of regaining competitiveness on a global scale. And this is what we did, and we are now reaping the fruits, the benefits of this reform process. So just to mention that what we have been doing is not something that I say as a panacea for everybody to do. I'm not saying that just emulate the German role model and all will be fine. No, every state, every country, every member state has to find its own model. But please, you have to be competitive in a global economy in order to survive, in order to generate the kind of revenues that we need, that we all need, to support what has been rightly called the European social model. And if I may, I would just like to quote what a leading European politician said recently in Bruges in a speech. And I won't disclose the name of this politician, because you might be surprised where she's from. Oh, I shouldn't have said she. Anyway, because Paul said Europe is still being dominated by this neoliberal ideology or philosophy. Now listen what this political leader had to say in Brussels, in Bruges, sorry. But it is too easy and flat out wrong to blame the EU or the introduction of the euro for the current hardship in many European countries. No, the problem was rather that members failed to keep their own house in order. Many member states did not make ends meet. They did not reform and consolidate in the boom years, which should have prepared them for when the circle turned. And on top of that, member states had long-standing structural deficiencies in labor and product markets that became a barrier to growth in an ever more competitive global economy. Now guess who said this? Not Chancellor Merkel. It sounds like Merkel, right? No, the Danish Prime Minister, and she is a social democrat. So it's not just us who think that the problems go deeper than just, you know, the usual economic cycle. No, the crisis is unprecedented that we are in. We need to launch, as individual member states and together in order to solidify the euro, we need to launch a reform process that is much more ambitious than just throwing money at the problem. This won't do it. Now, you talked about this being German debt. I just don't understand why this is German debt that was accumulated in this country.
International debt?
No, this is your debt. This happened in this country. There were foreign banks involved, certainly. No doubt about it, German banks. But the jurisdiction was in this country. And they actually came to this country. Sorry, I have to say this, John. They came to this country because of lax regulation in Ireland at the time, and because of the tax regime, tax incentives. Yeah, that's why they came here. Yeah, but the responsibility, and please don't get me wrong, but I have to say this: the responsibility is with you, with the Irish people. What happened in this country? Yeah. Now, how to deal with this is another question. And yes, of course, we do realize that this is a burden on the Irish economy, on the Irish people, that is almost unbearable. So yes, we are ready to extend solidarity. We have extended solidarity, not just to Ireland, but to other countries as well. There are 3 countries at the present time, and there probably will be more, I regret to say, 3 countries that have a so-called what is being, let's say, called an adjustment program. Basically, it's a bailout program. 3 countries. Now, who is backing these rescue packages, the support? Now, it's the European Union and the IMF. But as I said, at this present time, Germany is the anchor of the Eurozone. It's also the anchor of all these rescue programs. If we were to lose our AAA status, you would be in real trouble. And why are we still enjoying AAA? Because of the reforms that we launched in the first half of the last decade. Now, another point is the fiscal compact, you said, outlaws Keynesian economics. I think this is plainly wrong. What the fiscal compact does is asking every member state to have a balanced budget. Now, why is this outlawing Keynesian economics? That's all it does. Actually, it calls about a structural deficit, 0.5%. The structural deficit means that this should be no more than 0.5% over the cycles. That's the definition of a structural deficit. So there is some leeway for doing things, you know, when the economy contracts, even in the fiscal compact. But the point about the fiscal compact is, and to us this is fiscal responsibility, rather austerity, is that in the medium and long run, you have to live within your own means, and this applies to the private sector, it also applies to the public sector, which does not exclude that you can do some stimulus if this is required. And look what we have been doing. In my country, in 2008 and 2009, there was a huge stimulus program, even in Germany, because our economy was contracting by more than 5% at one point. So we launched the stimulus program. Yes, we did. Car scrappage scheme, for example. And we will be able to do this in the future as well. But what is important is to ensure that member states, and this goes back to this point that in order for the common currency to survive in the long run, you have to have a fiscal union. And a fiscal union means fiscal responsibility in all those taking part in the fiscal union. So this is what the fiscal compact does. And by the way, we introduced a so-called debt brake into our constitution. Because just to make sure that that the public deficit remains under control in the long run, we will probably, and please don't quote me on this, we will probably never ever pay back all the public debt, and we don't have to. You can live with a certain level of public debt. Sure you can, But if it becomes excessive, you are in real trouble. And why? Because you are at the mercy of the markets. If you accumulate excessive deficits, at the mercy of the markets. And would you rather be at the mercy of the markets than being a member of a European Union, of a fiscal union, that when it comes to the crunch, the member states are willing to extend solidarity to each other? And please, what I said is firmly ingrained, is deeply ingrained, let's say, in the German approach to the Eurozone and to the European Union as such. We know where we are. We know that we depend on democratic and political stability in our neighborhood. We know that we depend on others being prosperous as well. We will not benefit in the long run from imposing austerity on others and seeing others collapse. No, it's quite the opposite. Germany needs a prosperous neighborhood because we are, not only because we are an exporting nation, but this is not just about economic prosperity and stability. It's about, in my view, about much more. It's about political stability. What we have achieved, sorry John, but I'll finish with what we have achieved after the Second World War, and Germany indeed is the main beneficiary of this, is building a peace community, a community of stable peace in Europe. Now why is the European Union being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize? Because this is indeed a historic achievement. And we Germans are acutely aware that this is something that is basically guaranteed by European integration and by a stable and prosperous neighborhood.
Eckhart, there was one question from this gentleman. I think you
Sure.
asked specifically about corporation tax.
Yeah.
And,
Sorry, yeah.
And then I'll ask you, if you feel compelled, if you would just come in on that. I'll ask Eckhart first of all because
Yes.
it's important.
Sorry.
What I was asking is, the conversation here today has been about consolidation of fiscal rules, and it appears as though Ireland is getting a lot of pressure to bring our corporation tax in line with the European average. How could we maintain a competitive advantage being a peripheral country if this was to take place?
The official German line on this policy on this is, we are not exerting pressures on others, or we are not, let's say, advocating a common tax rate across Europe. We are not. We do recognize that there need to be, let's say, flexibility, let's put it this way, even on tax rates. What we are advocating at the present time is a common tax base, but not a common tax rate. We do recognize that for countries such as Ireland, there's a good argument to be made for your corporation tax. It's part of the Irish business model. And as I said, we want your country to recover and thrive. We want other countries to recover and be prosperous members of the European Union, because that is to our ultimate benefit. And this is part of your business model. Now, whether it needs to be 12.5%, that's for you to decide. And also, please keep in mind that there is a difference between nominal tax rates and real tax rates. There always is. So Germany is not pushing for a common tax rate across the board in Europe. There will have to be, and Dan mentioned this as part of the political union, yes, there will have to be deeper integration, further integration, if we want to stabilize the common currency, that's for sure, and then the tax issue will come up. But our policy is not that there be a common tax rate across the board in Europe.
Okay, and I said all the speakers want to respond. If you could respond briefly, because there are many people that want to get in. So
I really do want to jump in here, because I'm a board member of the International Tax Justice Network, and as such, and I also did some research, and actually a PhD on tax policy and tax competition, and therefore I do feel somewhat competent to answer this question. Actually, I feel not only competent, I feel compelled. It is interesting that the Irish government has been extremely successful in portraying its policy as a clever and innocent piece of industrial policy of creating jobs, and it has hidden successfully the actual financial interests that are behind it, because much of Irish tax policy is not geared towards companies producing in Ireland with Irish workers. Much of its tax policies is geared towards international financial companies, including German companies, who have benefited of not just the low tax rates, but in particular of low regulation and low degrees of transparency. And according to the OECD, which has defined what is a tax haven, tax rates are only one aspect. And actually a tax rate of 12.5% is not even that low compared to many other tax havens. But what Ireland does also offer, and what makes it a proper tax haven, is the lack of regulation and the lack of transparency. So for instance, many German banks have installed financial vehicles. They're not even subsidiaries, there are vehicles outside their books to speculate, for instance, with subprime mortgages from the US. They have done that in Ireland not just because the tax was low, but because the oversight was low, because they were able to do it here. And not only Irish banks have gone under in the crisis, some German banks have as well, at high costs to the German taxpayers. And so I think a country that bases its competitive edge on such a policy is doing the wrong thing also for its own people, because those banks created, I think, maybe a handful of jobs in Ireland for doormen and watchmen and cleaning personnel. That's about it. The recent research publicized in Britain about Starbucks and Google also showed how the Irish tax model is really working. It's not that those countries are, not only that those countries are shifting profits from other European countries to their so-called headquarters in Ireland, they are actually using Ireland to funnel their profits through, again using the lack of oversight. They're not, even if they only were paying those 12.5% in Ireland, but at least you could say that the Irish state has got some advantage of it at the disadvantage, at the loss of the other European states, like Britain in that case. But in reality, those countries have taken their profits, funneled them through Ireland to proper tax havens, Caribbean style, with 0% taxes. So that is not a competitive advantage for Ireland at all. it is not in the Irish interest to try to prevent a tax solidarity within the European Union existing. The European Commission is at the moment discussing a proposal of a common consolidated corporate tax base that is not defining a tax rate, even though I may favor a common European minimum tax rate, but that is not even the issue. The issue at the moment is, let's define the tax base. The tax base is the chunk of corporate profits on which the corporations have to pay their taxes. But then let's make sure that only those profits are taxed in a given country, let's say Ireland at their tax rate of 12.5%, only those profits that are actually generated in the country, in Ireland, with Irish jobs, and not the profits that are being shifted across borders just for tax purposes, just shifted in the books. So I think there are some progress is happening there. The Irish government, I hate to say, is one of the, along with the British for strange reasons, because the British would benefit, but they are the ones blocking those proposals. Where else does a competitive advantage lie? Just to say a few things. Well, I don't think it's taxes, as I said. I think the German case is a good example for that. I think you need an industrial base. I think you need, for the IT companies, you need a knowledge base. You already have a good advantage, that is the English language, which is much better than in countries like Greece or Italy. But you cannot just rely on financial services and tax dodging.
That's good. Dan?
Maybe to draw some of those things together, the gentleman there said Anglo was the biggest banking disaster ever. That's not true. DEPFA Bank. DEPFA Bank was based here. It was a German bank that moved over here for regulatory purposes. To our great fortune, another German bank, Hypo Real Estate, bought it in 2007. When the crash happened, it melted down, and the German government had to put up 100 billion euro to bail out Hypo Real Estate, mainly because of what DEPFA had got up to in this jurisdiction. Now, I raise that because most people here haven't even heard of DEPFA. We all know about Anglo because it's cost us a fortune. And this is one of the problems that really has come since the crisis, that everybody wants to blame everybody else, and nobody is seeing the costs other people have borne because of this. And this is, in my view, causing this fragmentation of solidarity in Europe. But we all need to say, we've done something wrong, other people have done bad things, but it's not a straightforward, it's all their fault for doing this to us, and we're not, this idea of victimhood. And I'd also, just push that.
What's the biggest banking loss on the balance sheet?
No. But anyway. And then this issue of how much we've been forced to bail out the banks. This was mostly decisions made by the Irish government. Right? By my calculation, the ECB forced the Irish government to pay about 5 billion in bondholders. Now, John, I'd be interested in John's views on that, and he may have different views as he was closer to the whole thing. But by my calculation, of the 65 billion that we bailed out, we put into the banks, 60 was both administrations did themselves, and 5 was forced upon the Irish government by the ECB. So, even in terms of the bailout, it seems to me that we're disproportionately blaming outsiders for the bailouts of the costs of bailing out the bank. And I just think that's something we need to be careful about. On the corporation tax thing, I totally agree with everything that's been said. And I think the government needs to differentiate its strategy on this. The low corporation tax rate is extremely important for this country because attracting foreign direct investment, that really is the most dynamic part of this economy. And the low corporation tax is a very important part in attracting that. But allowing companies to use it as a tax dodge, and somebody, I think you said that accountants are much more glamorous than economists. I'm sure that's true. They're certainly more creative. And never underestimate the creativity of accountants to be able to exploit loopholes. And that's happened. And other countries see that, and they really resent, more than attracting, the Pfizers and the companies that really do make stuff here and provide services, but they really resent this idea that Ireland is allowing companies to get away with paying little or no tax anywhere. And on that basis, it seems to me that the government needs to differentiate, protect the 12.5%, but move in favour of the common consolidated tax base, so that, yes, that's going to mean some loss of revenue, tax revenue, but it will protect the rate. But by not moving in either one, it seems to me that Ireland's position, if we do get into fiscal union territory, there will be much more pressure for more fundamental change. So I think the government needs to differentiate two parts of the strategy, try and keep the rate, but agree on the consolidated corporate tax base.
Thanks, Dan.